Across Newcastle and the Hunter, 2NURFM 103.7 as we take a look at some of the things happening in the world of politics. We do that with Dr. Jim Joseph, Professor of Politics out of the University of Newcastle. And Jim, before we get to the big topic we have today, we just kind of casually spoke about something 15 seconds ago. When are we going to have some politicians that actually have the guts to do the right thing and decommission daylight saving like Queensland has done?
Well, Mark, I can't answer that question. Good morning.
Is that just too hard?
What I can say is that you've already framed it in the way that the whole issue of daylight saving is a negative.
Yes, I have.
Where there are lots of people who would probably say, well, it's a great thing. I mean, yeah, we have to adapt.
That's all right. They're wrong. That's fine.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what politics is all about, isn't it? Negotiating the various positions.
All right, so something that may or may not be a little bit more nuanced than that is the tax cuts, the stage 3 tax cuts, so-called, that are slated for a couple of years from now. And Jim, you wanted to have a look at some of the politics in and around that today.
Well, it's really quite interesting the way that the politics is unfolding, because we have a government which has, as a party going into the election in May, promised to maintain and committed themselves to keeping the previous government, as it then turned out to be, their tax cuts. In a sense, they'd already hoisted themselves on their own petard, politically speaking, because they voted for them in 2019, when, the responsible thing to have done would have been to have said, hang on, this is economically irresponsible, and that's the ground we're going to stand on, that it is, yes, we will support some form of tax cuts, no, we won't support unfunded and the type of tax cuts that are being brought in. They didn't do that.
No, they didn't.
So now, as they went into the May election, they were then committed to doing that, to those tax cuts. Now, they keep reiterating that nothing has changed. The opposition, particularly Peter Dutton, as the leader of the opposition, has been trying to turn this around into, it's not about tax cuts, it's all about trust. And if they don't implement these tax cuts, they're betraying the public, etc., etc. Now, what's politically interesting about this is it's narrowing the whole scope of the issue down into one little promise. Well, not little promise, but into one single promise. Bearing in mind that this is coming from the leader of a party that, when in government, must have broken at least 6 or 7 key election promises over the course of their tenure in the 2019 to 2022 period. So it's a bit rich from that perspective. But politically, the traction that Peter Dutton is trying to get is to keep the focus just on one promise and one outcome, likening it to Julia Gillard's carbon pricing process, which was erroneously and again cleverly characterised by the then opposition as taxing carbon, which it clearly wasn't. But because it was such a complex issue, they were reducing it down to the one little thing. Peter Dutton's trying to do the same thing at the moment. And politically speaking, he's getting a bit of traction on that. How the Labor Party in government navigates this, I think in the first instance, the navigation mark will be to simply keep things going and focus on the budget itself, because the tax cuts do not form part of the budget to be brought down in a couple of weeks.
Well, look, there will be obviously a whole lot of new chatter that will come post this little budget that's coming up shortly. Excuse me. So we'll have to wait and see what the referee's decision is on that. But if you look at the politics around framing it around tax cuts, etc., when you do go to an election saying that the thing that our big poster, our big thing that we're looking for is cost of living, which was mentioned 100 million gazillion times. They also potentially foolishly, in my view, also gave a number, a dollar figure on how much your power bill they're going to save, 275, which they've got no way of getting anywhere near. To that, I think that would be stupid politically to say, well, we will now not go ahead with these tax cuts. Granted, they're a couple of years from now. To be fair, to give them some credit here, at this stage, there hasn't been anything concrete to suggest that will be not gone ahead with. But again, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, the sort of the politics here is the political judgment that the government brings to bear on this. And, if we're just talking purely responsible economic policy, the tax cuts are totally irresponsible because they're unfunded, and secondly, they're unfair to the lower end of the tax scale rather than those who are at the upper end. In the 180,
but everybody over 45,000 is going to have some benefit from them, though, which is still most
yes.
workers.
And secondly, politically, it's just not. There's no evidence to suggest that those people will turn their money into new investment to boost productivity or to boost the economy. They will spend it perhaps, or they will hive it off into something else. But the really interesting thing, I think, is whether the government sees the commitment to trying to lower the cost of living and implement the appropriate policy strategies that will help lower the cost of living and try to achieve the reduction in electricity prices that they're talking about. And you're quite right. I think putting a dollar figure on it is
it was just
high risk.
It's high risk and it's dumb. I mean, to say we want to achieve that's a goal, and we'll look at all the different things, which might come across wishy-washy, is a little bit more common sense.
Yes.
To say we've done the numbers and we've come up with 275 ... That's
Well, that remains to be seen. But in terms of making progress, at least towards lowering the cost of electricity to consumers, lowering the cost of living for the average, Australian, etc., those are also promises that they have to be seen to be upholding. And if it comes a clash between the tax cuts, let's say in 2024, and the budget in 2024, ensuring that they stay on track and to lower the cost of living, the trick with this forthcoming budget is to be seen to be attacking the cost of living, and to be seen that for those strategies to be registering with people that yes, this is going to work. 6 months' time in May, when they bring down a revised budget, that mid-year budget type thing, then if they can show that they've made progress towards lowering the cost of living, then they're in a much stronger position that if, in the lead up to the 2024 budget, the idea of having a series of unfunded tax cuts on the books officially then, which is a huge cost, they may then be in a position politically to trade off and say, well, maybe we need to tweak those tax cuts a little, maybe we need to operate them slightly differently, maybe we need to abolish them, not do them all at all. But they need to be in a strong position in terms of living up to their other promises that they went to the polls with, so that people can say, well, okay, they haven't been able to keep every single promise, but they've kept the big ones. And so, Mr. Dutton's going on about breaking trust and all the rest of it, but they've actually kept trust in terms of delivering on the cost of living, which is something that most people would be really keen. Granted, for people between 120 and 200,000 income, they would regard a tax cut for them as helping them significantly towards the cost of living. But it's also helping the vast majority of wage earners who are in the sort of the 45 to 120,000 bracket. Not household income so much, but the individual income. Reducing that tax burden, if you like, if it is indeed a burden, that's another debate.
Yeah, well, with the cost of everything, all these things are becoming a burden at the moment. If they don't get this right, if you're playing the long game as the opposition here, which is really the next election, you can almost start writing the ads. Well, they came in for cost of living. They failed on the 275. They put your petrol price back up after we put it down, and tax cuts they got rid of. So if they fail on all of these, they're already one strike out with the petrol. They could end up being a one-hit wonder.
Well, especially if...
Long way to go, granted, but...
If the global economy goes really badly pear-shaped. But at least one can say historically the Labor Party and government in dealing with those sorts of global crises back in 2007 and 8, we weathered that storm because the government was prepared to change its economic ideology to some extent and focus on keeping the economy upright. Similar thing may be on the cards at the moment when Mr. Chalmers is now in the US, or will be in the US soon, discussing with leading bankers and so forth, the state of the economy and the fact that many of them expect, we're heading into more of a recession than we would really like. So he may well come back with some, hey, we need to change course here and we need to tighten up a little bit, etc. Exactly. If they have to do that, they have to be mindful of how they do that in terms of keeping those promises about trying to lower the cost of living. If the economy goes totally pear-shaped, well, everybody's in trouble. And yes, they will certainly be a one-hit wonder, but then the incoming government, whoever it might be, they're going to be facing a tidal wave of problems.
Yeah, same. So it'll be this year in reverse. All right. Well, a lot of balls to be juggling there, Jim. Thanks so much for your time as always.
My pleasure, Mark.
Yes, I do remember getting the $971 check. Mine paid for a tax bill I had at the time. Check from the ATO. Here, guys, you have it back. All right. That's what's happening in the world of politics with Dr. Jim Joseph, 2NURFM 103.7.
A broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.